John Larroquette pushed one storyline so far that critics questioned if Night Court had gone too far. In 1986, he demanded NBC air something deeply personal that no comedy had ever tackled before. The network was terrified. They knew it could end the show and destroy careers. 18 million people tuned in to see what the fuss was about. The episode dealt with male vulnerability in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. Larroquette had lived through the same struggle himself, which made it even more dangerous. The aftermath changed television forever. John Larroquette was born on November 25, 1947, in New Orleans. His childhood was shaped by two worlds pulling in opposite directions. His mother, Berthala, worked in a department store and clung tightly to her Catholic faith. His father, John Edgar, was a Navy man whose discipline came with a dark side. The military meant constant moves from base to base, and when the family finally settled back in New Orleans by 1952, young John had already felt the instability of a drifting life. That sense of chaos never really left him. By age 5, he had already heard the sound that would stay with him forever. It came from a jazz club in the French Quarter, where legends like Louis Armstrong played under dim lights. His parents didn't know he had sneaked in. At home, there were prayers, curfews, and guilt. Outside, there was music, freedom, and fire. That tension stayed with him, feeding the restlessness that would shape his life. He grew up skinny and awkward, bullied for his size, and a speech impediment that made him stutter. By the time John was 15, he was staying out late just to avoid going home. He would sit in clubs, soaking in every note, or walk aimlessly through the French Quarter, hoping for something to pull him out of the shadows. School was supposed to be an escape, but even that became complicated. He started at Holy Cross School, but skipped classes often, forging notes just to go play music. Then he transferred to Francis T. Nichols High School, where something finally clicked. He discovered debate. He discovered acting. He discovered that his voice, once the source of shame, could move people. He was so good, he earned a scholarship to Louisiana State University in 1965. But he didn't take it. He wanted to make his own way. By 17, his family had been pulled across the country again. In 1964, they moved to Los Angeles after his father lost yet another job to alcohol. It wasn't just a change in scenery, it was a breaking point. But amid the struggle, something was forming. He had started collecting books, thousands of them. He was obsessed with voices like Beckett and Tennessee Williams. A priest had once handed him a copy of Waiting for Godot when he was just 12, and it cracked open something in him. He began experimenting with theater, playing with language the same way he had played with music. He even took a job as a radio DJ in 1965, spinning classical music without knowing a thing about it. He just learned as he went, teaching himself how to pronounce names like Beethoven, while dropping the thick New Orleans accent he grew up with. Everything changed in 1969 when he was bartending in a tiny Colorado town. One night, he poured a drink for a stranger named Toby Hooper, who was working on a film. That drink turned into a friendship, and that friendship turned into a favor. In 1974, John narrated the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He wasn't paid in cash, just a matchbox full of marijuana. He recorded the whole thing in an hour and never even got credit. But the voice stuck with people. That eerie intro would echo through the decades, reused in sequels and remakes. He never watched a single one. Meanwhile, he was falling apart. By the mid-70s, he had become what he later called a prolific drunk. He once sold his own blood for $12 a pint just to afford another night out. During filming of Ba Ba Black Sheep from 1976 to 1978, he often showed up hungover, delaying shoots. At his lowest, He drank up to 60 cocktails a day. In 1978, after a blackout landed him in jail, he hit rock bottom. 4 years later, on February 6, 1982, he quit cold turkey. His recovery saved his life and his career. That pain became part of his art. When the John Larroquette Show premiered in the 1990s, he played a recovering alcoholic, pouring all that chaos and shame into every scene. But his real break came in 1984 with Night Court. Finally, all those years of confusion, jazz, rebellion, and raw truth came together. John Larroquette didn't walk into Night Court planning to become one of the most iconic characters of 1980s television. But in January 1984, when he auditioned for the role of Dan Fielding, something unexpected happened. The script called for a clean-cut, serious prosecutor. But Larroquette, with a sly smile and wicked sense of humor, started throwing in raunchy one-liners about prostitutes and lewd behavior. Everyone in the room froze. Instead of pulling him aside, the producers leaned in. They realized this over-the-top sleaze fit the show's strange, offbeat energy. By the time the pilot aired on January 4, 1984, Dan Fielding was no longer a straight man. He was a narcissistic womanizer, dripping with sarcasm and ego. Larroquette would later say in 2023 that revisiting the character felt like stepping into an old suit that still fit. Dirty jokes and all. That first episode sealed it. During one of Dan's courtroom scenes, Judge Harry Stone casually asked about a prostitution charge. Larroquette didn't stick to the script. He deadpanned "pictures" as if offering evidence. Everyone laughed, except the NBC censors. The line nearly got cut. In 1984, that kind of joke could have caused major backlash, but it stayed in. That single unscripted moment helped define who Dan Fielding was. The cast was stunned. Audiences were hooked, and NBC quietly realized they had something risky but powerful on their hands. As the first season moved forward, things only got stranger. By December 13, 1984, in Season 2's Take My Wife, Please, the show pushed its boundaries even more. Larroquette found himself guiding a guest star through a nude scene. Not as a director officially, but very much as Dan Fielding. The plot twisted through storylines like Mac marrying Quan Lo for immigration reasons, Harry presiding over court while temporarily blind, and a man convinced he was invisible. That invisible man was played by none other than Michael Richards, who would later become Kramer on Seinfeld. NBC was nervous. They considered censoring it, especially after Larroquette added some personal flair to the risque content. But it aired anyway. 17 million people tuned in. That kind of humor wasn't supposed to work in prime time, but it did. One of the reasons the show held together, despite the chaos, was the real-life chemistry between Larroquette and Harry Anderson. Off-camera, they were friends who shared magic tricks and quiet moments between takes. In Season 3's Walk Away, Renee, aired December 19, 1985, Larroquette improvised a fake confession about an affair, something that drew inspiration from his own marriage struggles during the mid-1980s. The moment shocked viewers. It felt raw. Anderson played along effortlessly, understanding the unspoken rhythm they'd built. They were opposites. One was a magician, the other a recovering alcoholic, but somehow it worked. When Anderson died in 2018, Larroquette admitted that something irreplaceable died with him. But not everything behind the scenes was magic. In 1986, Larroquette learned he was making $50,000 less per episode than some of his co-stars, despite having just won an Emmy and being the show's breakout star. He threatened to walk. The timing was dangerous. They were filming Season 3's Author, scheduled for January 16th, and NBC couldn't afford to lose him. After tense talks, They bumped his pay to $100,000 per episode. He stayed. The episode aired, and the world never knew how close it came to falling apart. His first Emmy win in 1985 came as a surprise to almost everyone. On September 22nd of that year, he beat out heavy hitters like George Wendt from Cheers and Rip Torn from The Larry Sanders Show. His speech was unforgettable. He thanked his therapist for helping him tame his demons, drawing laughs from a crowd that had no idea just how real those demons were. Larroquette later admitted that Dan Fielding was partly inspired by who he used to be. Back in 1978, during his Ba Black Sheep days, he once drank so much he ended up in a near-arrest situation, only to be saved by a fan who happened to be a cop. That win pushed his salary to $50,000 per episode by the second season and marked the start of a 4-year Emmy streak that changed how comedy roles were seen. In 1986, his second Emmy came after a gutsy storyline about impotence. Larroquette had pushed for it himself. He wanted Dan Fielding to face vulnerability, something he had dealt with after giving up alcohol in 1981. The episode, The Wheels of Justice, aired on December 5, 1985, and pulled in over 18 million viewers. Critics debated whether primetime TV should show something so personal, but it hit home for Larroquette. He once said that the character's self-doubt reflected his own battles in the 1970s, especially during the darkest parts of his drinking. NBC gave him a $75,000 bonus after that win, but he struggled with the fear of being typecast. Even as he triumphed, he wondered if he was being boxed in as the eternal smug jerk. The next year, on September 20th, 1987, when he won his third Emmy, Larroquette shocked everyone again. During his acceptance speech, he hinted that if he won a fourth, he might step away to avoid becoming a caricature of himself. At the time, Night Court was at its highest ratings, 24 million people watching every week. Fans couldn't understand why he'd even consider leaving. But privately, Larroquette was rejecting scripts left and right, 12 that year alone, because they all wanted the same sleazy character. He feared losing his range. Variety called the speech an act of rare honesty, and though it surprised the public, it preserved his future as an actor. By 1988, Night Court hit another high with 25 million viewers every week. Larroquette used his momentum to push for creative control. He wanted to direct. He got his wish in 1989 with This Old Man, but even before that, for Hit the Road, Jack, which aired January 14, 1988, he added his own research. He'd spent time in New York's real night courts the year before, collecting strange stories, including one about a papaya vendor, which ended up in the episode. He wasn't officially listed as director. That credit went to Jeff Melman, but his influence was all over it. He even added a quiet moment where a character turns down alcohol, a subtle nod to his sobriety. It was a powerful personal touch, buried inside the show's wild humor. Then came 1989. The show was still a hit, with 23 million watching, but tabloid stories started to swirl. Rumors of affairs on set, whispers about his past, and old ghosts came knocking. Larroquette had been sober since February 1982, after a DUI scare the year before nearly ruined him. He admitted in a 1993 interview that he once drove drunk so often he used the sound of tires scraping curbs as a guide. It was funny on screen, dangerous in real life. That year, he rejected a 5th Emmy nomination, wanting distance from the spotlight. 5 tabloid stories linked him to co-stars. He denied the claims, but they stuck. He later confessed he spent $200,000 on therapy to keep his demons in check. Fans were stunned. Here was a man who had won 4 Emmys in a row and walked away from it all. After Night Court ended in 1992, John Larroquette tried to reinvent himself. He launched a new sitcom called The John Larroquette Show, and the pilot aired on September 2nd, 1993. But it didn't go as planned. Almost immediately, it sparked backlash. Larroquette, who was also an executive producer, was blamed for being tone-deaf. Letters poured into the LA Times by October 18, 1993. Even though the cast was diverse and the show tried to talk about race, most people felt it missed the mark. Surprisingly, talented actors like Chi McBride and Daryl "Chill" Mitchell were still part of it. But many viewers felt uncomfortable watching, and some even called for boycotts. Just days later, the second episode aired on September 14, 1993, and the controversy deepened. This one, called Celibate, focused on addiction. Larroquette's character struggled with sobriety, just like he had in real life since 1979. But instead of sympathy, the episode got complaints. People felt it used alcoholism for laughs. Some scenes made light of relapse and temptation, which felt too close to Larroquette's real struggles. Critics said it lacked sensitivity. Reddit threads today still bring up how dark and offbeat the show felt. It wasn't like the usual sitcoms of the time, and that made it harder for viewers to connect. According to a 1996 article in Deseret News, NBC eventually canceled the show, in part because of how poorly it handled serious topics like addiction. The second season started with 16.5 million viewers, but the numbers soon dropped, and the backlash only grew louder. By 1994, NBC tried to fix things. The show had ranked 71st out of 122, so they reworked it completely. John's character got a new love interest and a day shift. This change appeared in the episode Changes, which aired on September 20th, 1994, and it did pull in 16.5 million viewers. They also got rid of most of the dark storylines about alcoholism. Still, Larroquette fought to keep at least one relapse scene because he believed it added realism. He had been to rehab in 1979 and wanted that truth to stay in the show. Critics noticed the new tone but said it still wasn't funny. Even with fresh sets and lighter plots, something felt off. On November 1st, 1994, an episode called Acting Alone aired and brought in 17.7 million viewers. It featured a plot about a JFK assassination film, which stirred more controversy. Online forums still mention how the show lost its edge, but didn't become any more likable. Despite efforts to fix it, the show finally ended in 1996 after 84 episodes. NBC pulled it off the air in the middle of season 4. The old controversy from the pilot never really faded. Viewers kept bringing up the white patch scene and called Larroquette insensitive. That same hate mail even showed up years later. The show only aired 4 times that fall and never climbed past the 71st spot in ratings. Reddit users remember corrupt police and racist characters that made people uncomfortable. Even though it tried to talk about race in a bold way for 90s TV, networks weren't ready for it. In the end, NBC's president, Warren Littlefield, had to calm things down during cancellation and offered to work with Larroquette again in the future. Still, most fans were shocked the show lasted as long as it did. Larroquette didn't disappear after that. In 1997, he made a comeback on The Practice as Joey Herrick, a charming murderer. His character appeared in a 3-episode arc starting March 4, 1997. The role was nothing like his past ones. Herrick was manipulative, cold, and even got away with killing more than once. It was such a powerful performance that Larroquette got nominated for an Emmy. At that point, he already had 4 Emmys from his night court days between 1985 and 1988. Each episode pulled in around 15 million viewers. Critics loved how Larroquette brought real courtroom tension, and fans were hooked by the shocking plot twists. The role showed a different side of him and helped repair his reputation after the struggles of the early 90s. He built on that momentum and in 2007 joined Boston Legal as Carl Sack, a serious lawyer from New York. He first appeared in the Season 4 premiere Beauty and the Beast on September 25, 2007. Some people thought he'd been in the earlier Fine Young Cannibal episode from 2006, which featured a homeless man accused of eating human flesh. But that came before his time. Larroquette's Sack character was all about rules and ethics, often clashing with the firm's wilder personalities. It was a strong role, shaped by Larroquette's own past struggles with addiction. Between 2007 and 2008, he appeared in 40 episodes and won praise for how he mixed drama and comedy. That earlier cannibalism episode, though, sparked real-world protests because of how it handled homelessness. In the episode Glow in the Dark, which aired on February 12, 2008, Sack's calm persona broke down. He grew jealous when Shirley's old friend showed up in a high-stakes legal case. It revealed a more insecure side of his character. Interestingly, in real life, Larroquette once got a devil tattoo during a drunken blackout in New Orleans in the 70s. He talked about it in a 2008 interview, and while the tattoo didn't appear in the show, it helped inspire the idea that Sack had hidden flaws. The romantic tension between Sack and Shirley reached a peak during a balcony argument in that episode. It got solid reviews and reminded fans that Larroquette still had depth as a performer. That same year, Larroquette directed 2 episodes of Boston Legal, including The Court Supreme, which aired on April 22, 2008. It was a big deal because he hadn't directed since the 90s. One scene featured Alan Shore arguing in front of the Supreme Court, and it echoed Larroquette's own focus on moral gray areas. This return to directing was personal. He had taken time off after his 1996 show ended because of burnout and recovery from alcoholism. Fans noticed how some characters mirrored his own past struggles. One scene even included a line based on his real-life Emmy wins from the 80s, adding emotional weight. The directing gig brought his total to 5 credits and helped rebuild his reputation once again. During filming, there was one unexpected moment. Larroquette and James Spader got into a heated argument over the script for The Court Supreme. Larroquette, who was directing, wanted the scene to stay serious. Spader wanted more of his usual eccentric flair. They clashed for hours and almost halted filming. Eventually, they reached a truce after 2 hours of mediation. That fight, revealed in a 2010 Entertainment Weekly interview, mirrored Larroquette's past battles with network executives. It even helped shape a scene that became one of the season's most praised. No one got hurt, but production was delayed for a day. For his work on Boston Legal, Larroquette earned another Primetime Emmy nomination in 2008. He didn't win, but critics applauded how he made Carl Sack both tough and vulnerable. His performance reminded people of his earlier Night Court character, Dan Fielding, who started out sleazy but became more complex between 1984 and 1992. In total, Larroquette played Carl Sack in 33 episodes. Viewers especially remembered the way he clashed with colleagues, sometimes even firing people for odd behavior. Episodes during this time averaged 8.2 ratings, and at its peak, more than 10 million people were watching. His work led to a Tony Award in 2011, proving that even after setbacks, Larroquette could always find his way back. In 2014, John Larroquette stepped into something completely different. He joined the TNT series The Librarians and played a mysterious caretaker named Jenkins. But Jenkins wasn't just any librarian. As the episodes went on, it was revealed he was actually Galahad, the legendary knight who had been alive for over 1,500 years. In Season 1, during an episode that aired late December, his past was finally exposed. Larroquette gave the character a grumpy but thoughtful edge, drawing on his years in the theater. He even refused to let them use computer effects for key magical scenes, asking for practical props instead, because he wanted the character to feel grounded, like a real person with ancient wisdom. He filmed the show in Portland, Oregon, and stayed with it for 4 seasons until 2018, appearing in 42 episodes. But the most unexpected part came later, when he said the role helped him face his fear of death after a health scare in 2012. That performance earned him a Saturn Award nomination in 2015, showing that even at 67, he was still evolving. Then, in 2023, something shocking happened. He returned to Night Court, the show that made him famous in the 1980s. But this time, the character Dan Fielding wasn't the same. The sleazy prosecutor from the past had become a tired public defender, still working in the same courtroom, but now facing the weight of time. In the very first episode of the reboot, which aired on January 17, 2023, Larroquette cracked a joke about his old Emmy wins from 1985 to 1988, saying, "I've got more Emmys than you've got years on the bench." It got laughs, but there was something bittersweet underneath. Behind the scenes, he admitted the experience brought back memories of old friends who were no longer there, like Marky Post and Richard Mall, who died in 2021 and 2023. He almost said no to the revival, worried he couldn't live up to his younger self, but actress Melissa Rauch spent a full year convincing him. He eventually agreed and appeared in all 16 episodes of Season 1. The debut brought in over 8 million viewers. In 2024, he surprised fans again by doing a guest voice on The Simpsons. The episode aired on January 7, 2024, and it was called Bart's Brain. Larroquette played a quirky professor who sounded like he came straight out of New Orleans. And that wasn't just for show. He was born there on November 25, 1947. He spent 3 long recording sessions perfecting a thick Cajun-style accent, and even used real slang from his childhood, like lagniappe. The role felt personal, and people noticed. It reminded them of his early days working as a radio DJ in Louisiana. He hadn't done any animated voice acting since 2002, so this episode caught people off guard. It drew 2.1 million viewers and took him 5 hours of coaching just to make sure it didn't feel like a cartoon stereotype. But the biggest surprise came in March 2025, when he told Entertainment Weekly that he turned down a role in a Marvel movie. In 2020, he was offered a small part in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness by director Sam Raimi. The part only had 10 lines, but came with a $500,000 paycheck. Still, Larroquette said no because the script required him to do a scene involving mystical transformations and partial nudity. He wasn't comfortable with it. He joked that at 72, he wasn't stripping for superheroes. It wasn't the first time he had turned down a role for that reason. Back in the 1970s, he refused to do a nude scene for Stripes in 1981, too. That Marvel moment could have introduced him to a whole new audience, but he didn't want it. It reminded him of the time in the 1980s when he withdrew from Emmy nominations to avoid overexposure. Since Night Court, he had turned down over 15 roles for similar reasons. It was another reminder that he's always done things his own way. As of August 2025, Larroquette is back in front of the camera, filming a biopic called Bayou Blues. He plays jazz legend Sidney Bechet, who was born in 1897 and helped shape the sound of New Orleans jazz. Larroquette went deep into the role. He visited 12 jazz clubs across Louisiana, listened to live music night after night, and started learning the clarinet, even though he'd never played an instrument before. He practiced 4 hours a day, determined to make it look real. During this research, he discovered that his own uncle once played with Bechet in the 1940s. That connection made the role personal. Filming started on July 15, 2025, with a $15 million budget. He stars alongside Jon Batiste. The movie is set to come out in 2026. He even lost 20 pounds to better match Bechet's appearance. The project feels like a return to his dramatic roots, just like his award-winning run on Boston Legal between 2004 and 2008. Back in his personal life, Larroquette has been married to Elizabeth Ann Cookson since July 4, 1975. They met during a play rehearsal in 1974 and picked Independence Day to marry because it was the only day they weren't working, but their early years weren't easy. His fame during Night Court, which ran from 1984 to 1992, brought constant rumors of cheating. By the mid-1980s, they started couples therapy to try and rebuild their trust. In a 1993 interview, Larroquette admitted that the demands of fame nearly ended their marriage. But they held on, and by 2023, they had reached 48 years together. They now live quietly outside Los Angeles. Fans were stunned they lasted so long, especially in an industry where more than half of marriages end in divorce. They have 3 children. Lisa Katharina, born in 1969, was Elizabeth's daughter from a previous relationship. Then came Jonathan in 1977 and Benjamin in 1982. But before all that, in 1971, when Larroquette was just 23, a paternity lawsuit from a brief fling almost derailed his early career. He settled the case privately for $10,000 to keep it quiet. That story eventually inspired an episode of Night Court in 1987. Jonathan now co-hosts a podcast called Yeah Dude and has recorded over 900 episodes since 2006. Benjamin chose music instead. Larroquette says being a father saved him from self-destruction and helped him grow up faster, even though the early legal mess could have ruined him. His darkest days came in the early 1980s. On February 6, 1982, he crashed his car in Los Angeles while completely drunk. He broke his arm, suffered a concussion, and realized he had hit rock bottom. At that point, he was drinking as many as 60 cocktails a day. He later joked about it on The Tonight Show in 2007, but back then, it was serious. After the crash, he checked himself into rehab in Arizona for 28 days. That decision saved his career and his marriage. From that day forward, he stayed sober. In 1993, he created The John Larroquette Show, where his character also battled addiction, just like he had. The show ran for 84 episodes and was deeply personal. He later revealed that he once drove home drunk by following the sound of the curb hitting his tires, and that police would escort him home instead of arresting him, because it was before DUI laws were fully enforced. After he got clean, he began speaking at recovery events and helped over 100 addicts find support. Even with decades of sobriety behind him, temptation never fully disappeared. In 2010, he had surgery for a herniated disc. Doctors prescribed opioids for the pain, and within a few days, he started feeling old cravings. It scared him so much that he flushed the pills and went straight to an AA meeting. In 2024, he quietly celebrated 42 years sober with his family. He also mentioned he had mentored 15 recovering addicts. That same year, fans were surprised to learn that back in 1974, he had narrated the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in exchange for marijuana. It was a reminder of how far he'd come. In 1990, something terrifying happened. A 28-year-old woman from Texas, obsessed with him from Night Court, broke into his home in Hollywood Hills on May 15th. She had sent over 50 strange items and letters before, but this time she left 12 more letters at his house, some of which were disturbing and threatened self-harm if he didn't respond. He called the police, and she was arrested. On June 6, 1990, he got a 3-year restraining order. That moment changed the way he saw fame. He installed alarms and hired guards, and later shared in an interview how fame could turn dangerous when fans crossed the line.